Welcome to another episode of a Step Ahead Adoption Services podcast. This is your host, Dr. Andy Bonanti. Today, no stranger to the podcast, we have owner of a Step Ahead Adoption Services, Valerie Marble. Valerie and I thought that we'd go on a Vale and Andy talk show for the next couple of months. And so this week, we thought it'd be fun to discuss parenting through unexpected diagnoses as it relates to adoption. So we know we're always learning from our children and our parenting is constantly evolving. So let's just explore a little bit about how Val and I approach these things. So thanks for joining us again, Valerie.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I'm excited to talk about all this today. I think you and I both have some very good insight and experience with all of these topics.
Yeah, and so we're really gonna be sharing a lot of like firsthand, what I'll just call wowzers that we may not expecting when we were considering all things adoption. So let's just jump in and talk a little bit about parenting through new diagnoses. Autism, fetal alcohol syndrome, ADHD, with our adopted children, and how it can be emotional for the parents and what our experiences look like. So, Valerie, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So, it can definitely be an emotional roller coaster. Like you mentioned, diagnoses later on as your child grows, that's not really something hopeful adoptive parents think about when they decide to choose adoption. And, maybe some of them do have the conversations of, okay, we don't want our child to have, air quotes, special needs. But I feel like when a person, that is part of their criteria for an adopted child, you can't have that. Yes, I know you can take it as far as if a child is diagnosed with Down syndrome, or there's going to be a genetic component that is going to alter their lives. Yes, I can totally see that and wanting to avoid something like that. And that is something that could be diagnosed while the baby is still in utero. So, but as far as autism, ADHD, fetal alcohol syndrome, speech delays, physical delays, literally anything, a lot of that you don't see coming. And, you can say, yeah, I don't want my child to have special needs. And then later on, they end up being diagnosed with something that is considered special needs. So it's definitely emotional. In my case, I felt like I saw it coming from the very beginning. One of our children we adopted through foster care. And so he was about 16 months when he came to us. And so, there's already been a lot of that development that has already happened. And so I feel like I kind of saw some of it coming. Milestones weren't being hit, and there were a lot of outbursts surrounding frustrations that he had with not being able to communicate what he wanted to us. That was definitely a difficult time. I really didn't think that the diagnosis of autism would come up, though. ADHD, yes, but really not autism. We did find out later on that autism runs in his family. His half-brother has also been diagnosed with it. He's quite a bit older than our son. But we didn't know any of that at the time. And thankfully, we're blessed with amazing resources in our area. We have different therapies, amazing teachers, and staff at the school that are willing to follow an IEP. And autism is hard, and it'll probably only get harder as the years go by. But we are constantly asking ourselves, okay, should he be able to do these things, or do we really need to adjust and go easier due to his diagnosis? I feel like that is a huge challenge that we're always navigating, because you really can't compare any child to one another, but especially a child that does have some type of diagnosis. You can't look at his peers and say, okay, my child isn't doing these things. Yeah, you just can't compare any of it. And Andy, I don't know if you have any insight on any of this, and how you have navigated these different diagnoses with your daughters.
Oh, I feel like there's just pieces that I want to respond to. So, uh, I love how you talk a little bit about special needs, and some of the stigma that goes along with that.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, folks, we all have some special need, right? And it's really just about what has been accepted by society and what has not. So I fully embrace all things when it comes to the term special needs. And really what I have found through parenting my daughters is identifying. So like the earlier that you can identify these things, the earlier you can start some intervention and support through the resources available in the community. And I think that's really powerful because unless I missed my edition, I didn't get a parenting manual. And you know, Valerie, I love that you were like, I saw this coming, but my dad head was buried way in the sand in that, we were approaching probably 16 months of no speech, like none, like da, and that was it.
Yeah.
And yeah, oh, she's fine. She'll talk when she's ready, like, oh, no issues. And learning really more about autism and some of the other diagnoses that we've kind of really leaned into. There were not little warning signs, like big warning signs about those missed developmental milestones that yeah, I just completely was oblivious to, right? Like even though you fill these, ages and stages forms out at the doctor's office
Oh,
of the
yeah.
pediatrician, and I'm marking, you're supposed to be marking yes, yes, and I'm just going nope, 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 and just going right down the list like it's nobody's, like no issues. So when you're a first parent, you don't know, and it's
Exactly. Yeah.
really interesting now too because we have our second child, and she's 15 months and she's saying all these words like she's like a parrot. She will just repeat things.
Yeah.
And she eats great. Like these things that I was like, she's so advanced, but she's not
Yeah.
really advanced, right? Like it was the opposite. We were just not really in tune to the delays.
Yeah.
And there's this just a special mention when we talk about those that are adopted, right? Because some of this could happen with our own biological children. We have no
Oh,
idea.
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But with adoption, we don't know what that prenatal care looks like. And
Yep.
so here I sit with a 15-month-old and, 3.5-year-old. And I'm just now learning that, you know, my first daughter, she was exposed to alcohol in utero, which, that wasn't disclosed.
Yeah.
And when we were at the hospital with our second born, she suffered from NAS, right? A neonatal abstinence syndrome, which is a withdrawal from an opioid. So that wasn't disclosed, and we had matched 6 months before that, before our daughter delivered. So these are things that you just may not be expecting or anticipating, but we have learned to fully embrace through our parenting styles.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of just want to make a note too about, you said how all of this can happen with a biological child too. They can receive any different kind of a diagnosis. And I'm very glad that you said that, because that is something that I try to always point out to hopeful adoptive parents as well. Those that come with a whole list of what they hope for in a match or in a child, then that's perfectly fine. If that is what you are hoping for, that's great. But you also have to take in consideration, like, if you were pregnant, and you did absolutely everything right, you followed every rule, did all the things, did all the prenatal care, you could just as easily have a child that is diagnosed later on with like a speech delay, autism, ADHD, literally any of those things. So that is something to definitely keep in mind too.
Well, I think that transitions nicely into our next question about what are some of the signs that we should watch for as adoptive parents in regards to speech and motor skill and social development delays. And then we can talk a little bit about what early intervention looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe I'm the only parent that is like this, but I feel like probably all of us are in some way. You're always kind of like over analyzing your child. And I will say it's not so much with that first child because, like you said, Andy, you don't know, like you're a first time parent, you don't have anything to compare it to. But I've definitely been guilty with my second and third child, like, just over analyzing every little thing and, being concerned about our second child, his, was he going to have a speech delay because he wasn't talking? And, now he's getting ready to turn 4 years old and there's never a silent moment when he's around. Like he literally says everything. He, has full on conversations, something that I was totally freaked out about just, because I was comparing my children, was absolutely nothing that I need to have a concern for. So definitely as you, have multiple children, keep in mind that you have to treat each one as their own and never compare them to somebody else. But also, you do know your child best. So, different things to look for could be, like Andy just said, at 15 months, there was absolutely no speech happening, no real words coming through. Definitely look out for that. Or as they get a little bit older, like, yeah, hey, they're saying 5, 6 words, but they're not forming anything into a sentence, or, you're kind of getting feedback of they're not comprehending everything that you're telling them. As far as like motor skills go, climbing, running, jumping, how they use their hands, what they, how they pick things up, how they eat, literally everything I feel like is being evaluated from when a child is a newborn. I don't really know when it stops, always, I guess, but in those early years, they're really evaluating everything to see if there is some type of developmental delay. And it could even be with the whole social aspect. It could even be, is my child just shy? Or do they actually, have the potential for some type of diagnosis because they don't make eye contact? They cannot go up to and have a conversation back and forth with a peer. They don't pick up on personal space of their peers. They don't have a bubble like everyone else has. So, there's definitely things that your child and, hey, yeah, this is just something, a little quirk that they have, or is this something more that we need to look into? And kind of going into like early interventions and everything. With my kids, obviously our oldest, we got him straight into every therapy that we possibly could after he came to us, because he was lacking in a lot of different things. And so we started that early intervention. It was great. He later got into like an IEP when he started preschool, and that's been great as well. But just as an example, my youngest, she just turned 1 a few months ago. She's 15 months old now. So, once again, I was kind of over analyzing, and, as she was hitting her milestones of crawling and rolling over, she was a little bit behind. And so I at one of the checkups just mentioned it to her doctor and said, hey, you know, like, I'm probably overanalyzing, over concerned, but because of these reasons, I do feel that she could be behind on some things. And, you know, since she did have different exposures in utero, maybe it's something we could get on top of. And her doctor was all for that. I feel like if you bring it up to your pediatrician, they're going to be for it, especially, you know, they're probably wanting to bring it up themselves. So, you know, we scheduled an appointment with therapy, had her evaluated, and they literally said, nope, you have nothing to worry about. A lot of the things that she wasn't doing, she literally did for the therapist. And I was like, oh, of course, if this isn't parenthood, then I don't know what is. But, you know, they were like, hey, you know, she doesn't have all her motor skills yet with her hands, but looking at her, just assessing her, she's a tiny little thing. Like, her hands are way smaller than the typical, you know, 10-month-old. So you have to take that into consideration. So the point of that is to say that it is never too early to seek interventions. If you have any concerns, definitely voice your opinion and see what you can get your child into to, you know, help them succeed as they go through these different milestones.
Valerie, it's so funny. I'm trying not to laugh, but you and I are probably a bit more similar than we even know, because so my first has had some heavy diagnoses along the way, and my second also had some in utero exposures, very similar. But I beat you to the punch, because at the 9 month, I went to the doctor and I said, you know, I think she's missing it here, here, and here. And so we did the same thing with our local early intervention services. And
Mhm.
it's so funny because it's the same thing. Like, those milestones, I was answering, no, she doesn't do it, but she just did it during that
Yep.
evaluation. So yeah, I mean, that's funny, right? I do think that most most parents, especially adopted parents, at least I know I can remember how I felt. You're so overcome with joy and excitement to have your firstborn that it is very easy to miss, you know, some of these delays that we would regularly be in tune to.
Mhm.
So if I were to give any real advice, it would be, you know, um, looking at these screening questions that are coming through at your well visits for the baby at the pediatrician's office, and man, not overanalyzing about, you know, hey, if you're checking no instead of yes, but kind of keep a mental note to see what that looks like. And if you start to feel, I've been checking no a bit more often than I've been checking yes.
Mhm.
Don't let your mind go to, you know, the worst case scenario right away, but lean into those resources. So I think we talked about it on a past episode about early intervention. I know every state's version of early intervention is a little different,
Yep.
but it can start with something that we're all required to do for our children, and that's at those wellness visits, right? Lean
Yeah.
into your provider, ask those questions like, hey, I think that, you know, I'd be open to doing some type of evaluation locally to just make sure that they're meeting all the developmental milestones. And that's really where early intervention takes it away.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, so how can parents help a child on the autism spectrum feel secure while also navigating adoptive attachment concerns?
Yeah, this is a really tough one. Um, since autism, you know, it is a spectrum. So every child is going to be different. Some are going to have more severe diagnosis than others. Definitely, my son, he is on the lesser side of things. You know, he I don't even know how to say it. You know, his diagnosis is minimal in the grand scheme of things compared to others that are higher on the spectrum. But you know, as a baby, you're still going to be able to do skin to skin with your child to meet those bonding needs, attachment needs, which at that point, really, you're not even going to know any of these diagnoses. So it should just be something that you're doing no matter what with your child, is doing that skin to skin time, you know, meeting all their needs by diaper changes, feeding them, waking up with them in the night. That is already forming that early attachment, no matter what is going to come in your future. But, you know, you have to remember that you're still going to be building that attachment with your child as they grow. And as they grow, if a diagnosis comes along, you're still going to be able to meet those needs physically and emotionally. As they get older, that's when a lot of those factors of autism do come into play. And just for example, like your child may not like to be close to you or snuggle, or, you know, they may only want to do it on their terms. And my son, he is like that. He likes to have you in the same room as him, you know, sitting on the couch together, but definitely not close. But there will be times where he literally says, you know, hey, mommy, will you come and snuggle with me? Or, you know, will you come watch this movie with me? Like, that is him vocalizing to me, like, hey, I need this one-on-one time. I need like physical touch, physical contact. And so I definitely always taken advantage of that. And when he asks to snuggle or, you know, come sit by him to do something, I am right there, because that doesn't come around very often. And it is also helping with that attachment. You know, he's vocalizing what he needs. And you have to remember too that you need to be patient and have a gentle approach as you are navigating parenting your child with a diagnosis. You know, like we've already said so many times, every child is going to be different, and their needs are going to be different emotionally, physically, mentally, no matter if they have a diagnosis or not. So, you know, those that do, it can be hard. It can be very, very hard and frustrating and emotional to parent them. And so I'm constantly reminding myself, and, you know, both my husband and I, we kind of call each other out on it sometimes, you know, like, hey, remember patience. But I feel like that's something you have to do, because there are just times when you do get frustrated that it's so much harder, or, you know, you can't communicate with your child like you can other children their age, and it does just get frustrating and hard. So, you know, not only be patient and gentle with them, but also with yourself as you're navigating all this. And another thing on that too is, even though your child, you know, they may not fully understand you or be able to communicate with you, they're always still understanding like your tone that you're using with them. That is big with my son. You know, he can definitely tell when I use a tone that is more upset, or, you know, is sad or something like that. He definitely picks up on that. So definitely keep that in mind, kind of filter that as needed as you are, you know, navigating the attachment, you know, parenting, all the things.
And remember, two things that I'll say to remember. One is, regardless of your experience, because if you recall, both Valerie and I have a healthcare background, but regardless of your experience, when it comes to your own children, sometimes you have blinders on for some of the things that, if it were a patient that walked into your office, you'd be able to identify it immediately. But when it comes to our own children, you have a set of blinders on. And that's also the foundation of healthcare, why you shouldn't be treating family because of these blinders.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's really important is, you know, Valerie, you said it a couple times, each child is so different, but we tend to lean into knowing that each child is different, but these stereotypical expectations for certain diagnoses, right? And so autism, it was heavy in our household because, some of those stereotypes where we think, autism as completely nonverbal
Yeah.
or, non non-social. And I had therapist after therapist say, well, I think she's on the spectrum. I think she's on the spectrum. And I worked in healthcare for 15 years. And I'm
Mhm.
like, nope, nope, she's not, right? Because I was leaning into that stereotype where she
Mhm.
wasn't nonverbal. She was verbal. She didn't have a great vocabulary, but she was still engaging.
Yep.
And she's a little snuggle bug. Like I can't
Mhm.
sit anywhere without almost sitting on top of her because by the time I'm going to sit down, she's already like waiting for me to get comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's just, that's atypical when you think of autism, but
Yes.
that's my stereotype, right? Like that's just what
Yeah.
I think of.
Mhm. Yep. Definitely.
Okay, so what approaches can families use to support focus, regulation, and growth when it comes to autism, fetal alcohol syndrome, and ADHD?
There
And you
are,
and you already said it, right? Patience it goes a long way.
yeah, yeah, definitely patience, understanding all the things. Like, yes, that is key. And then there are like so many different resources. There are just so many different things out there now. And it is important to listen to your child or like watch them as they're learning or trying to tell you something, and that way you're going to be able to pick up on what they need from you. Just a few things that we use within our household, and a lot of these it took a while for us to pick up on. Like my son, he is 8, and so we have been figuring this out over the years. And I feel like stuff that probably would have benefited him a long time ago, we're just now figuring out. And that's okay. So, there's like the weighted jackets, weighted objects, like those little snuggle me stuffy things. They're weighted. Those are great for some kids that need that extra like stimulation, something that I think it just makes them feel like protected when they have something heavy on them. They even make like weighted sheets and blankets now. You can get like a whole comforter set that is weighted depending on what your child needs. It could even be just as simple as letting your child wear long sleeves all the time. Uh, I notice it with my son, especially on days that he knows he has therapy after school. I don't know. I think he just knows it's coming. He's preparing himself. But long sleeves make him feel more comfortable. So it'll be the dead of summer here, 100 degrees outside, and he's wearing long sleeves. And my husband and I, we have just finally just let it go because we've learned that it does make him feel safe, secure, and more regulated. And I think it helps him, perform his day-to-day tasks that he needs to do. I think it's also important to always be in communication with the therapists that are caring for your child, because they're seeing your child in a different light, really. They do these things with them that they are trained to do, that they know what to look out for. They know, how to help the child through those moments. And just as a parent, I don't know any of that stuff. So it's very important to take the time when you pick your child up from therapy, ask the therapist, like, hey, what went well today? What went bad? Our therapists are always kind of giving us that feedback when we go to pick them up. But one day it came up that he really liked this vibrating machine. I don't even know what it's called, but it's like an entire platform that you stand on, you turn it on, and it literally like vibrates their whole body. And so therapist tried it with him. He loved it. She was like, oh, hey, like this made him perform like so much better throughout therapy. I'm going to start doing this every time. And so she brought it up to me and I was like, hey, that's genius. I'm not going to have this huge platform in my house, but is there something else we could implement instead? So went on to good old Amazon and found that they make like vibrating seat cushions and like pillows. And so I ordered a couple different ones for him, and he loves it. We have two now. He takes one to school with him, and his teachers allow him to use it. He just sits on it. It's quiet. It's not a distraction, but he is getting that like stimulation that he needs. And then we also have one at home, and he doesn't use it all the time, but I will notice him, you know, going and picking it up, either holding it to his chest or sitting on it when he needs to use it. Another great thing, which I feel like all schools now have this implemented, but making sure your schools have a sensory room where your child can go and that they actually use it. Our son's school is very, very good about using the sensory room, and he gets to go there on days where, you know, he's having a rough day, or on the other side of things, if he had a great day and it's an reward for doing something, if he chooses to go into the sensory room, they go let him have some time in there. And then another huge thing, which I feel like there's so many thoughts and opinions on, so this is only mine, but does your child need a medication or not? And if they do, make sure you're reevaluating as they grow, because their needs are going to change for that. I have always been a person of, you know, hey, we shouldn't medicate children, you know, shouldn't do all these different things because it's just probably masking things. But after some time, after different evaluations, therapist opinions, you know, all the different things, we decided that, hey, yes, it would be best to put our child on an ADHD medicine. He was pretty young, like probably kindergarten or so, but you know, everyone kept telling us like, hey, we don't know what level he you know, performs at, because he is just going everywhere. He cannot focus on one thing to even answer a simple question for us. So, you know, they thought this would be beneficial. And yeah, it definitely was. We saw a huge improvement with a lot of things with him. And we probably used it for a couple of years. And then there's always a thing of, hey, take holidays from your medication, especially ADHD. So we took him off of it this past summer and didn't use it at all the entire summer. It was fine. You know, he still did great. I honestly didn't see too much of a change in him. And so when it got time for school to start, we were like, okay, let's, you know, slowly transition back onto this. So we started it again, and there was no change in the way, you know, that he performed, how he could focus, how he was acting. The only true change that we saw was in his attitude and moods. And he was just so grumpy and almost mean and just, you know, not his normal happy self, just so moody and emotional. And so my husband and I, you know, were talking it through, and we're like, hey, the only thing that's different is we put him back on this ADHD med. What if this is the issue? So long story short, we found out that it wasn't doing anything good for him anymore. It was making him feel awful, and he couldn't verbally communicate that to us, but we could see it in the way that he was acting. So we have fully taken him off of that now. He doesn't need it anymore. Who knows what the future holds, but in this particular case, it's a good reminder to always reevaluate those medications that your child is on, and do they actually need them or not during that point in their lives. And, you know, as you move throughout the years, it's very important to Yes, come up with resources, items that your child may need, but always to fall back on everyone else that is also taking care of your child. It's always great to seek other opinions on this and see, what they think would benefit your child at that phase in their life.
Well, thank you for that. We're not there yet, but I imagine in our household we're also going to have an ADHD diagnoses in the future. Um, you know, very controversial is the new medication for autism as well. I
Mm,
don't know enough about it to engage in a conversation, but I continue to kind of like evaluate like what's in the best interest for
mhm,
my daughter. I what I have what I have become um, very guilty of doing, which is good and bad, is listen to your therapists, right? So
yeah.
my daughter has a lot of therapists, and I listen, but I do have to kind of censor some of the information that we get from our therapists because some have very strong opinions,
Mhm.
and they may be biased because of their profession,
Yeah.
but some have very valid, applicable opinions that are important for the development and growth for my daughter.
Mhm.
And I think that it's also really important to understand that some of the behaviors are environmental. So, what she does at home, because I live this right now, because my daughter doesn't do a great job of eating, but in feeding therapy, she has two different feeding therapists 2 times a week. She's a
Mhm.
champ. She eats everything that they put in front of her. And
Yeah,
it's environmental and it's also based on the individual that's present with my daughter. And I hope that I'm not enabling in any way for her not to eat. But I do know that, there are some things that are out of our control and you just continue to work and do what's best for your child.
for sure. Yeah. And I feel like too, a child is always going to behave differently for someone that is not their parent.
Yeah.
uh, I see that all the time, and they do different things, and they do almost a lot of times they do more for a person that is not their parent for whatever reason. They always say like, "Hey, your child's safe." Person, they know that they can have these meltdowns with you, they can fully be free to be themselves in front of you, and that means that they fully feel comfortable with you and they trust you. But yeah, it's true, like your child does behave a lot differently for you compared to professionals out there.
So next question. How do families cope with the uncertainty of a diagnosis that's suspected but not yet confirmed? And I already shared, right? Like I was in pure denial, and there were probably also a few nights where I was in complete over analysis mode where I was looking at everything with a skewed perspective. But I'm curious what your perspective is on it.
Yeah, so number one, you have to remind yourself that no matter what the diagnosis is, like, in those early days when you're having all the tests, doing all the evaluations, and then you're kind of just left sitting waiting for that potential diagnosis, you have to keep in mind that your child will still be your child after that diagnosis. uh, Nothing changes about that. They're still the same person. You're not going to change the way that you look at them or the way that you love them or absolutely anything like that, because they are still your child. You're still going to do everything that you can to help them and see them succeed. um, I think just something that is kind of a benefit of having finally figuring out a diagnosis is now you have something like tangible to help you get the services that they need and to help them excel in all of that. Because with some diagnoses, schools won't put a child on an IEP until they have such and such diagnosis, or you don't qualify for some therapies until it's been written down on a piece of paper that a doctor confirms that your child has this. So it's definitely important to get those diagnoses because it is going to help your child in the long run.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We were split in the household as far as wanting a diagnosis, and the sometimes there's a fear or a stigma also associated with, well, I don't want my child to have the diagnoses, but the number of doors and opportunities that the autism diagnosis opened up for our daughter. I mean, she's in 24, 25 hours of therapy a week that she otherwise would not have had access to, which is really important because ultimately we're trying to build up that development. So I think that's really important to consider.
For sure.
What roles do therapists, schools, medical providers, and peer networks play in helping the family navigate adoption and diagnoses?
They have a huge role. If you're blessed to have therapists and school teachers and doctors and peers that are helping to see your child succeed just as much as you want to see them succeed, then you've got the right people in your corner. Our son was ultimately diagnosed with autism because of his early Head Start teacher. She saw the signs and encouraged us to go get him evaluated. And, really, yes, I said I kind of saw it coming, but I don't know that I would have taken the steps necessary to take him to get evaluated. I didn't really know where to start, didn't necessarily know that, hey, we need to do this in preschool. Like, I figured it would be something that came later on in life. So she encouraged us to go. And then, after we got that diagnosis, that's when the trickle effect started happening and all of these services opened up to him. So I am super grateful for that specific teacher because of that. We were also kind of able to shift our perspective and meet him where he was at better and provide for his needs. As he's grown throughout the years, we've definitely seen, different medical professionals come into play, different teachers. Everyone plays a huge part in it. Something that we are just now starting to navigate is like the huge role that peers play in all of this, because, he's getting to an age where children, they're becoming more mature. They're 8, 9 years old now, second, third grade. And, they're having back and forth conversations with each other and, playing these more in-depth imaginary games with each other, just doing all these things as they're learning and growing. And children, specifically with an autism diagnosis, they're not moving as quickly to mature as their peers are. So we've been super blessed to have an amazing teacher that is by his side with everything. She is all about inclusion. And she actually approached me about, hey, we have this book. I think it's called literally just My Friend Has Autism or something like that is the title. And she asked if it would be okay that she read it to the class to kind of just help them better understand him. And I could have cried when she brought that to me, just because I was like silently navigating the worries of, okay, he's in second grade now. His peers, they're having these conversations. They can fully talk back and forth with each other, and he can't. And he doesn't understand like personal bubbles, all the things, like how is this school year going to go? And so when his teacher brought that up, I was like, oh my goodness, yes, like I love you so much. Please read that to everyone. And so she actually planned to do it, when he was in a different class. That way the class could all sit down together. And if they had specific questions, I told her, hey, make it open, talk about it all so everyone can better understand him in their second grade level of thinking. Another thing on peers too is, we have a small, what I like to call village of people, parents, we're all the same age, our children are around the same age, we're all raising our kids together. I'm sure everyone has something like this, no matter if you live in a city or a small town. But I finally just had the conversations with the moms of our friend group as well. And, just kind of had a vulnerable moment and said, hey, like, these are my fears. These are my concerns moving forward. Like, this is how he's going to be different. And at first I was like scared to point that out because I was like, man, is this just going to create a target on his back, for all these other kids to play mean, because kids can be like that. But thankfully we have the right people in our corner, and all the moms were very understanding and, said, hey, we'll talk with our children about this and make sure that they understand exactly, what he's facing and how we can help him through that. So I think it is just huge. All these people in your circle that are going to come into play, they play a huge role in your child's life and well-being.
Yeah, and I think to your point, when we talk about our villages that help support our families, some will be well prepared for our children, while others won't, right? So
Yep.
I have really leaned into the therapists and the medical professionals. We're not in school yet, right?
Mhm.
But it's a struggle, right? Like, because I want my daughter to be integrated and I want her to have those social experiences with
Yep.
children her age.
Yep.
But I also don't want her to feel completely alone and isolated because she's not developmentally there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we have really balanced. That's why I said earlier 25 hours of therapy. There's 3 days a week that she spends in therapy,
Mm-hmm.
with therapists and clinicians that are actively working to help support and advance her development. And the other 2 days, she's at a daycare with kids her own age,
Mm-hmm.
kind of living into the expectation of what it could look like with school without an IEP, which she'll definitely have. But eventually we want to get her to that point. What I've noticed too, not with her peers, but with peers of my own, that when you say the thing different, right? We said there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be differences. Adults also fear differences, right? We often talk about how kids can be mean if they don't understand, they see something different. But adults can also similarly act differently. And so,
Yeah.
I have two daughters. One is developmentally on track so far, knock on wood, thank you. And I have one that's not there yet. And it's pretty obvious. And I have seen family members gravitate towards my younger daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And by gravitating towards the one, completely excluding any interactions or engagement with the other. And so those are also tough conversations that I have to have for, for my daughter, right? So she doesn't feel some kind of way as she grows up, and that she's still able to maintain some relationships and not feel excluded.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you shared that part of things too, because yeah, we've been there as well, and probably every parent that faces this will. And kudos to you for addressing those issues. I know myself, it is very, very hard and sometimes awkward to do, but it is necessary. So then, your child can see you advocating for them. They may not fully understand, but they'll be thankful in the future. Yeah, that's a very true point, because yes, not everyone is going to be willing to see the good in all of it and do what they can to help.
Yeah, and it's almost easier just to exclude, right? Like, okay, if this peer is just not getting the bigger picture, just cut them
Mhm.
out. But that's also not doing anyone any favors.
Yeah.
It's about growth, right? Like growth for my daughter, growth for me, growth for that individual. And so having nice, healthy conversations about the different perspectives is important.
Yeah, for sure.
So how can adoptive parents prepare for school meetings and ensure that their child's unique needs are fully recognized and supported? And we already know that IEPs really do go a long way to support these conversations as well.
Yeah, IEPs are huge. That's kind of where I'm at in life. My son's academics, everything revolves around IEPs. So as you're going to those meetings, because you usually have a meeting, I don't know, I always lose track. It's every quarter or every other quarter or something like that. But you are having those meetings with all the school professionals. So before attending those, you're going to want to make sure that you and your spouse or support person, you're all on the same page before attending that meeting. There are questions that you guys are going to have, different concerns that you're going to want to bring up. And, unfortunately, there's a time limit on those meetings because it's during the workday for all of these teachers. So you're going to want to have either a list or a mental note of, hey, these are the things that we have to touch on while we're here, so you don't feel rushed and miss out on talking about the biggest things that are your concerns at the time. And typically the schools do mail out paperwork beforehand that has everything that you're going to discuss in the IEP. So it's always nice. I try and read that beforehand because as they're reading through these things in front of you, it's a lot of information and overwhelming. And some of it I honestly don't fully understand because my brain doesn't think on a teacher level. So I like to sit down and read it beforehand so I kind of know what to expect going into things. Before those meetings too, you should also ask your therapist if they have any suggestions or, different concerns that they think should be addressed with the teachers to implement into the classroom environment. And the biggest thing is if you don't feel supported by all of the people in the room at that IEP meeting, or you don't feel like they all have your child's best interest in mind, don't be afraid to take action. It's all about you have to make decisions and stand up for your child that isn't able to do that for themselves. So, I have taken it as far as to move my child from one school to another. I don't know if everyone else needs to be that drastic, but it actually worked out really, really well for us. His first 2 years of preschool were in one school, and then he was getting ready to start a third year because we were planning to hold him back from kindergarten. And it was literally like the week that school was going to start. And I had just been feeling so anxious about things. I just didn't feel like sending him was the right thing to do. I just didn't feel good about it. And, we are blessed to have another school within like a 15-minute drive from us that he would be able to attend. And we actually had a lot of connections over there. So I that day reached out to the principal over there, kind of talked to him about it. He was so welcoming. He literally was like, hey, whatever he needs, we will help him with. We are here to help him succeed. They had a transitional program for preschoolers that are being held back, but so they would do like preschool in the morning and kindergarten in the afternoon, so they could still socialize with their peers and do all of those things and get prepared for kindergarten the next year. So literally like 2 days before school started, I pulled our son from one school, enrolled him in another, and the following week he started school in this new town, this new district. And it was amazing. Best decision that we ever made. My husband and I feel the same way about it. I don't know how we would have felt moving into another school year with the school he was at before. So definitely always follow your intuition. If there is something that you're feeling uncomfortable with, definitely sit down and decide if it's something you need to take action on.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think, I'm sitting here uh, embracing my role as the dean at a higher education institution. I've heard a lot of conversations about IEP so far, and I think that it's important to just really highlight that IEPs follow a student if they want
Mhm.
all the way through to the higher learning um, here at a college or university level.
Mhm.
So often a lot of my conversations with students revolve around what their IEP looked like through school, K through 12, and how we can get them the same support and resources here at the college level. And I will even go as far to say that there are some professional boards. Nursing is a big one. We often consider like they have to pass boards to become a nurse. Um, they also allow for certain accommodations that are in line with one's IEP
Hmm.
for boards at the professional level. And I think that there's a lot of individuals that just don't know that. And so
Yeah.
conversations that I've had with other parents are, well, I want them to be ready and prepared for college. I want them to be ready and prepared for, their boards. Well, they can and still get those accommodations adopted into the learning program. So again, no stigma with IEPs, even into the college and university setting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because I honestly didn't know that was a thing
Yeah,
in the college setting. That's amazing.
yeah, most people don't know.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, last question. What unexpected joys and triumphs come from parenting children with complex needs, and how do families stay grounded in hope?
Yeah, there are so many joys that come with parenting a child, that's on the spectrum, special needs, anything. There's so many joys. You learn to celebrate literally every little moment when they do something that is fully out of character for them, or you've been working so hard on them being able to communicate something and they finally do it. Like, oh my goodness, that is the best feeling ever. Some things that are kind of fresh on my mind with that is a few weeks ago I was driving my son to therapy after school, and he's a very needs to know everything that's going to be happening, very scheduled, very routine. So I was explaining what the night was going to look like after he got home, and I wasn't going to be there because I was going out to a farmer's market and taking the other kids with me, and so he was going to have a special night with my husband, and he sat quiet for quite a long time. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he's like, "Hey mom, I think I want to rethink my choices for my plans tonight." And he literally, full sentence like that. And that is not typically something that he's able to do. He's not able to vocalize any of that, especially, just like the thought process of having to rethink a decision. I was so excited about that. Literally, like, I wanted to call my husband right then and say, "Hey, guess what he just said?" But I was like, "Nope, we'll save that for a later time." But it was just so exciting to hear him say that. And it was kind of like a breath of fresh air, because we kind of had been struggling with some different communication things. And the fact that he was fully able to verbalize that was huge. Other little glimmers of joy and hope can be, they make eye contact with the person that they're talking to, or they choose to say please and thank you without being prompted to. Like, those have been huge things in our house lately. It's amazing. And, I also want to say with that, yes, you should celebrate all of these things that happen, but also keep in mind when they do it one time, they may not necessarily do it again the next time that they need to. So when that happens, remind yourself, hey, they've done it once. I know that they can do it again. And, you know, just kind of go from there and just keep encouraging those good things. It can definitely be hard, no matter what. Parenting is hard in general, no matter if you have a certain diagnosis or not. Like, parenting is just difficult sometimes. And so I think everyone always needs to find the joys and celebrate all the triumphs that come with parenting your children, no matter what, because it is a lot and every moment deserves to be celebrated.
You know, I think like kind of reflecting a little bit on my parenting, what I have seen is with my second, some of the development, it's natural progression. You know, you don't necessarily see that, you know, night and day. It's like when you're watching your children grow, you don't see them grow, but someone, a family member that hasn't seen them for a year, all of a sudden they see them next time and oh my, how you've grown, right?
Yeah.
I think with some of these developmental delays that we get that moment in real time, right? Like to your point, you were just talking about your son and how he just came up with this perfect sentence structure that he normally would not have come up with. And so that was like that wow factor. I see that a lot with my daughter. Whereas, you know, even the little things like eye contact, it's just it's amazing because we're not seeing that natural progression that can sometimes go unnoticed. We're seeing like night and day. You know, the first time my daughter said, I want a push, like all those words, I almost didn't even know how to respond, right? Like, and here I am, like almost teary-eyed, like, sure, you can get a push, right? It was on a swing. It's just, you know, I think when my younger one says, I want to push, it'll be like, okay, I'll give you a push because she's already starting to put words together that it's not going to be as impactful. So those are like real aha moments. You did it, you know, that because you don't necessarily see that all the time. So that's pretty unexpected and amazing in my opinion. And you know, I will say there's also some unconditional innocence that accompanies a child with a diagnosis. You know, like I just can't begin to explain it. And I hope that everyone experiences that joy. But of course, I also don't hope that you have a child with developmental diagnoses. But I cannot put into words the sense of joy and unconditional love that I feel from my daughter, you know?
Definitely. Yeah.
Ooh, so this is probably record long podcast for our sessions.
We
But I
probably could
think
have
this,
kept going.
yeah, you know, we could talk about this all day long.
Probably.
But I think this is a good point to like stop, reflect, wrap it up. Next month we'll be back, right? The Val and Andy show will be back, and we'll talk about just getting back to the basics and the foundations of all things adoption. So thank you everyone for listening. Always great to share experiences with you, Valerie. So thank you.
Same to
I
you.
hope everyone enjoyed it. And if you want to know more about A Step Ahead Adoption Services, visit their website, www.astepaheadadoption.com. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time